It is no secret that one of the many reasons to Nazi Germany's military successes was the use of anything and everything, and the refusal to accept anything as too obsolete. For example, throughout the war the German army employed a total of 2.75 million horses, 179,000 of which were lost alone on the Eastern Front from June 1941 to February 1942. The same went for military equipment and tanks of defeated or conquered nations. From the Polish VZ-29 Mauser copy to the Panzerkampfwagen 38, foreign equipment was commonplace in the German army and accepted widely. It is no surprise, however, that when France finally fell in the summer of 1940, that the Germans were only too eager to loot the remains of the French army for any goodies. At this stage of the war, just prior to the invasion of the USSR, the German Blitzkrieg fed off speed and maneuverability, more than armour and armament. From the fall of Poland to the fall of France, the main tank of the German army was not the Panzer IV we all know and recognise today, but the slightly smaller and more poorly equipped Panzer III, at this stage still boasting only the 37mm main gun. While the Panzer IV, at this stage still only fitted with the 75mm howitzer, was viewed more due to its slower speeds and heavier armament as an assault gun and an infantry support vehicle. The Germans had learned, however, while meeting French Char B1 and British Matilda tanks, that their 37s were not going to cut the muster, and promptly upgraded Panzer IIIs to fit the 50mm high-velocity cannon, and gave the Panzer IV a much more prominent battlefield position, as well as upgrading to the long-bow 75mm KWK cannon. At the stage of the fall of France, French tank doctrine was changing, and fast. Although still caught up with some old practices from the Great War, and indeed some tanks, such as the FT-17, things were looking up. 47mm main guns were fitted as stock to most main infantry tanks, and heavier breakthrough tanks, such as the Somme S-35 and Char B1, provided much needed muscle. It was these last two that the Germans were mostly interested in, although they weren't too fussy. Most captured R-35, H-35 and H-39s would find their way into far-flung reaches of the new Reich, mostly being used for auxiliary and policing duties. Many standard, unaltered French tanks would find their way onto the battlefields of the USSR, mostly being knocked out during the early stages of Operation Barbarossa in the Ukraine. Although the Germans didn't want to put all their eggs into one basket, there was of course a natural limit to the number of French tanks the German army could put into service, and although they didn't want to start to produce French designs themselves, their chassis alone could prove more useful for more outlandish designs. Fairly basic was the Somme S-35, just with its turret removed, tow hooks added to the stern, covered in machine guns, and used to tow flak wagons and transport supplies and stowage. While it is uncertain how many of these were produced, it is almost guaranteed that they were all knocked out fairly quickly, mostly on the Eastern Front. Then there was the R-35 T-26, which pretty much did what it said on the tin, being a Renault R-35 hull with the turret and 45mm gun of a captured Soviet T-26 being mounted on top. This of course boosted the R-35's original crew limit of 2 up to 3. Pretty cramped, I'm guessing. And then of course, most widely known, the FCM-36 Pak-40, which took the hull of the light FCM-36 French tank, mounted a small thin casemate, and the Pak-40 KWK 75mm cannon. This was an effective tank destroyer, and saw service on a few fronts. Another equally outlandish German design was the installation of 4 40mm rocket launchers onto various Hotchkiss light tanks, H-35, H-38, and H-39. It is unclear how many of these were produced, or even where it saw service. Finally, and perhaps the most known, is the Char B1 Flampanzer, which as you guessed is a B1 Pierce tank, with its hull-mounted 75mm main gun removed and swapped out for a flamethrower. This of course allowed it to retain its turret-mounted 47mm gun as a secondary armament. Like most of the tanks in this list, it is unclear how many of these were produced, although it is certain that, like many, they were used primarily on the Eastern Front.